And now we have our Italian pizza pasta party. I got two paisans that are coming on in. Two guys I really, really like, mentors of mine, liked them for quite some time. A lot of emotion, a lot of passion. This first guy, he is an activist. He's a journalist. You can check him out on his channel. He's also a Chianti lover and a meatball maker. Ladies and gentlemen, Debar is here.
How you doing, brother?
I'm doing great. How's Sammy?
Sammy's all right. He's upstairs sleeping.
Sure, he's sleeping. He'll start acting up once in a sec there, man.
Yeah.
I'm glad you're coming back on the show. Thank you for being a contributor on my new show. It's been awesome. People have been saying thank you for introducing Debar to all of us, and I say no problem, man. The guy's been a mentor for some time, man. You've been a roll dog to go where we got to go in New Hampshire, even to next who's coming on his spot. So thank you so much for coming on the show today, man.
Yeah, man, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right, let's bring in the next guy. He is also a anisette lover. He's an activist. He is the creator, I should say, and the editor of Trends Journal. Old school, man. This guy put it on the line. He was one of the only people out there to say, if we go into Afghanistan, if we go into Iraq, we will lose. He was punished by the mainstream media and the establishment. They took him off the air because he was on all the shows back in the days, but now he's back fighting with a vengeance. He got it right years after when we pulled out of Afghanistan. Trillions of dollars later, what did we do? We lost. Nothing changed. The Taliban is still in control, and he was right back then, and he's right today. Ladies and gentlemen, Gerald Celente is here.
Hey, thank you, man. You know, my real last name is Celentano, and Adriano Celentano was the Elvis Presley of Italy. They changed it, you know, when they came with Ellis Island kind of thing.
They make some ravioli too.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
So we got a lot of energy on the show today, gentlemen. Thank you so much. Let's start off with this first thing we were just talking about right today. We have no money for the American people. Even if you're a populist right, a Republican, or an independent who wants to see border security, you don't even get that. You get ugats, nothing. Can you guys make sense? We'll start with you, Gerald. Can you make sense of the Senate passing this bill funding war when they don't get the money for the border in which they wanted? Go ahead, buddy.
Could you make sense of people that have no sense? You got a bunch of little nothings there. Little boys and girls of nothing. Hey, Lindsey Graham, did you come out of the closet yet? You got little Adam shit up there in California. A little piece of nothing crap boy. What's his name? Mike Johnson? Hey, I'm an evangelical. Yeah. Oh, yeah, but you love war. What God you talking about, little boy? How about Mitch out of his mind McConnell? What are you talking about? You got a bunch of lunatics running this show in front of everybody's eyes. A freak show for all to see that aren't deaf, dumb, and blind and don't like to and love to swallow government crap. I eat crap and I buy sound bites. I'm an American.
Don, listen. Gerald Celente mentioned Lindsey Graham there. Lindsey Graham voted against this bill. So did Tom Cotton, warmonger Tom Cotton. So did Josh Hawley. I can't make any sense of it. It seemed like maybe they would sweeten the pot with more weapons for Israel. Can you make sense of this bill? And why do this anyways when you know it's going to be dead on arrival when it hits the House?
Look, everybody knows what's going on. First of all, they knew that they had the votes in the Senate, and they know that they don't, at least on the next round, have the votes in the House. Graham has a constituency that he gets to show off in front of without actually doing anything to advance their item. And without really, his vote against the war funding has no impact whatsoever on whether or not the war funding is going to go through. This is, interlocutory. It's preliminary. It's not the final disposition of the matter. And so he gets to look to the people who have a problem with the immigration, condition at the moment, like he's voting against that. He's voting against the war funding because he's going to get tough. He wants a much better standalone immigration bill et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If any such creature actually showed up, he'd be one of the first ones opposing it because the powers that be make a shitload of money on the way things are. But he gets to show off right now. It'll end up on all his mailings this year and everything else that he, voted on that so that he could get border security. But that's all it is. It's bullshit.
Don, are you saying that he did this because he was provided political cover? The same way a lot of the squad members and all these other people who are voting for a ceasefire or pushing a ceasefire in Gaza that didn't vote against the Iron Dome funding like AOC when Nancy Pelosi got her head straight. Is that what you're saying, that they voted for this because they had political cover? It's kabuki theater?
Yeah, it's play pretend. The actual policy had nothing to do with that vote. This is political cover. It's, putting on, dressing up basically. Yep. And like little kids do. They put on, mommy's and daddy's clothes and look like adults for a minute, and then they go back to playing in the sandbox or whatever.
Joe, go ahead, buddy. No, go ahead.
The policies that are going to be adopted are not decided even in the Congress, although that formalizes it. And those policies have most likely been decided. The rest of this is sort of a temperature taking of the public to see how much of this crap we'll put up with, and something that happens through their process that lets the narrative stay together, that gives at least some shade of an illusion of the fact that, that there's a legislature that's actually making policy. The border condition exists, and if they change it, it's because they have other goals now, or because the political outcry is just so great that they can't manage it at this rate. The war funding will happen one way or another. If the people here are so adamant against it that Congress is afraid to fund it, it's going to come from someplace else, Japan, Korea, the EU, wherever, and it'll come out of our pocket when you turn around, and higher costs for Japanese cars or for caviar, whatever the thing is, that our money, our labor, our time, our resources are applied to the needs of the elite here, and the elite here wants to take down Russia and then China, and they see this as an opportunity, and it's one of the big tools in the toolbox. So it's going to happen no matter what kind of bullshit they say.
Gerald, you got anything to add to that?
No, not really. Again, it's a joke. Yeah, I totally agree. They're going to pass the war for more money for war, and there's no talk about peace. And it's disgusting what's going on. It's matter of fact, I had a nightmare last Sunday that World War III began, and I've been having nightmares on and off about this. The slaughter of Palestinians in front of everybody's eyes. And if you talk about this, they call you an anti-Semite and you hate Jews. And as I said, 3 of my last 4 girlfriends were Jewish, so my best friends are Jewish, so save your crap. I'm not anti-American. I launched Occupy Peace a decade ago. I'm against war. So I'm not anti-American because I hate America's wars. So I'm not anti-Jewish because I hate what's going on over there. And the media is totally controlled, and there's no truth coming out. And the genocide going on in front of everybody's eyes just keeps going on. And as he was saying, Lindsey Graham, this is just a little act, and they're doing it regarding the immigration issue. And it has, and again, that little cotton mouth, a little arrogant little, I was in the military. Take it easy, Jack. All right. I could care less if you were stupid enough to go kill and buy their crap. You're the guy that loves war.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Every one of these, and a little Lindsey Graham, the little slob couldn't fight his way out of a paper bag, but he loves every war. We got men again. Without going into the details of it, you don't ask a murderer why they're a murderer, and you don't ask somebody mentally ill why they're mentally ill. I was the assistant to the Secretary of the New York State Senate. I ran major political campaigns in Westchester County, the richest county in America. I designed and instructed American politics and campaign technology, how to run political campaigns. I taught it at St. John's University. I picked up Ronald Reagan at the Chicago Hilton when I was 30 years old and put a brunch on for him with 16 of our board of directors. I've been with presidents, prime ministers, and princes. I've been on the other side. It's a freak show. Gutless little boys and girls telling everybody else what to do. End of story.
Yeah. So we've had Matt Gaetz, we've had Marjorie Taylor Greene talk about ending this war, putting their foot down in Ukraine. We had the Putin interview with Tucker Carlson the other day. So much information has gone out there. It seems like they have stopped a way to get the funding, at least from the United States for now. Don made an interesting point saying that if they don't jostle that last coin out of the piggy bank to get it to Ukraine, they'll find another way to get it somewhere else. But how is this whole situation going to end in the Ukraine? Right now, the average soldier on the front line is 43 years old for Ukraine. Almost 500,000 people have been wiped out. We have Zelensky going behind Zelensky's back, that Victoria Nuland had to fly over there and set shit straight. How is this going to end, Don, in the Ukraine as far as what's taking place? I mean, sooner or later, isn't Putin going to say enough is enough? I'm going to have to take Kiev if they don't stop this or end this?
Well, if it does, it's only a tactical retreat. The strategic goal, I mean, you could go to Mein Kampf and read the section on the role that Dolfo from his jail cell saw Russia playing in the construction of the German global empire. Russia is very, very wealthy in all kinds of natural resources. It is immense in terms of just the size of the real estate. It has a population only of 140, 150 million people for this massive piece of real estate. They're highly educated, very technically proficient. And it is essentially also the fuel tank in terms of energy and raw material for the factories of Asia, China, India, etc. So, and not even fully expressed yet. They see that the extension of their control of the world as, including the control of this, and they're not shy about their plans. There is this Helsinki group attached to the State Department that's had a running project to what they call decolonize Russia. They look at, their organizing BS is that Russian Federation is a successor to the Russian Empire, that the Russian Empire is the last of the great empires that to be decolonized, that it actually consists of somewhere, depending on whether they did blotter acid or orange barrel acid that day, of 12 to 15 different nation states that have been suppressed for 300, 400, 500 years, and that they need to be reinstated. Basically, the Russian Federation has to be overthrown, broken up. These nationalities, some of which number in the tens of thousands in terms of population, given back the real estate that was theirs historically, according to these fables, and some slight historical truth, and then of course they'll have control of these people. This is what Adolf Hitler wanted to do, and it was the same mechanism, that you would go to appeal to the nationalities, the individual nationalities of the Russian Federation is cosmopolitan in that it's multicultural. There are lots of nationalities, people with their own language, their own culture. One of the things that's actually unique about Russia, as opposed to the way that the British, for example, treated their colonies, is that the multi-ethnic aspect of the peoples and their interactions was respected and encouraged. Even the Soviet Union, they kept the languages that people had, and the people studied in them. They studied their culture. They brought writing to some that didn't have writing. This is something that is being manipulated right now in Ukraine, for example, with the Western Ukrainians who are ethnically closer to Germans or Lithuanians than to Russians, and the Eastern ones, although they've been together for hundreds of thousand years even. And these people imagine that they're going to be able to break Russia up and take control of the resources, basically, using this, situation I just described as the way to do it. And it is exactly what Hitler proposed to do in his jail cell in 1924.
It doesn't seem like they're going to stop either. Everything we see that they're not going to stop.
So that's my point. My point was that if they stop, it's tactical. Their strategic goal is to do that.
Yeah.
So as we saw with the Minsk agreements, as we've seen everywhere, when they stop it so they can regroup and rearm and whatever else.
Good point with the Minsk agreement. Gerald, I mean, the censorship too as well. What Don said right there, I don't think YouTube would want a lot of people to hear. Took our stream down the other day. I was breaking down the Tucker Carlson Putin interview, and they just keep censoring and taking it down and taking it down. And we continue to let it happen. Your thoughts, Gerald?
Well, I want to go back to Ukraine. Here's our forecast. They're not going to quit. And it's really following up with what Don is saying. We're saying there's going to be a major false flag event or a blowing up of a nuclear power plant. Something is going to happen where the support for Ukraine will come back. And it's going to be something like that. And it's only a matter of time. And going back to Ukraine, this was our Trends Journal back in spring of 2014. See how happy that guy is? This is by Dr. Paul Craig Roberts. He's a former Assistant Treasury Secretary under Reagan. Washington is driving the world to the final war. World hegemony is not a right America has earned. He goes on to say, Washington concluded that Russia needed to be confronted with or distracted by problems that would leave the Russian government less confident or able to counter Washington's aggression elsewhere. Again, what Don was saying in a different way. Ukraine presented the perfect opportunity for Washington to advance its hegemonic agenda. In a speech at the National Press Club last December, Assistant Secretary of State Victoria Nuland, who Don just mentioned, boasted that Washington had invested $5 billion in non-governmental organizations, those are NGOs, in Ukraine, you ready? For the purpose to teach democracy. So the overthrow is right there in front of everybody's eyes. And then if you look at this photo over here, this is the photo, the Sochi Olympics were coming up just before the overthrow of the democratically elected government of Viktor Yanukovych in Ukraine in 2014. And Victoria Nuland, along with that little other piece of crap, John Cheney, the rotten right? Hell, yeah, and Maida, and handing out cookies and candy and biscuits and stuff. This is what we wrote. Security expert. It's not if, but when Sochi Olympics terror attack. This was from Yahoo News. This is January. Remember, the coup takes place in February and March. This is January 16th, 2014. Veteran security consultant Bill Rathburn hopes that he's wrong about the upcoming Winter Olympics in Russia, but he has more than a hunch that he's not. Quote, the security threat is higher than it's ever been in the history of the Olympic Games, Rathburn told Yahoo News. In my opinion, it's not a matter of whether there will be an incident. It's just a matter of how bad it's going to be. So they freaked everybody out, told them not to watch the Sochi Olympics. The Russians are a piece of crap. They set all this up before they overthrew the government. It's a crime syndicate that's running America that people call a democracy. They're murderers and thieves. By their deeds you shall know them. Hey, Jamie Dimon, the Goldman Sachs. Hey, they're too big to fail. You're just a piece of crap. You're a plantation working of Slavelandia. They steal your money. And how many wars did they say? We're going to get that guy Osama bin Laden dead or alive. Over 80% of the people swallow the crap spewing out of a little daddy's boy mouth, George W. Bush. Yeah. So that's what's going on. And it's only going to get worse. There's going to be a false flag attack. The Israelis are ramping up the war against the, quote, militants in Hamas. Oh, the Hamas militants? You mean the Lebanese that threw Israel out of Lebanon? Why, they're militants because God gave them that land. I forgot, chapter 6, section 8 of the good book. I mean, who are you talking to? So they're ramping this thing up. They're ramping it up. We are in World War III.
Yeah, we're in it.
Yeah. Listen, I want you guys to take out your crystal ball and tell me if I'm right or wrong over here, because I do agree with both of you guys, what you're talking about. They've been planning this for quite some time. They're never going to stop. But if Putin does take Kiev, because I think he has no choice at one point, he has to. Otherwise, they'll never stop. What is the next country that the U.S. is going to ramp up and fund to get behind for war? I really did think it was Poland.
It's not even that.
Right,
It's going to be, look, here. 3 Americans were killed at the tower, whatever, on Tower 22 in the Jordan-Syria border. Let's bomb the hell out of Iraq and Syria. 3 Americans? What, about 30,000 Palestinians died? You see what 3 Americans dead gets the media to do and how America goes to war? Look what happened with 9/11. The whole country changed. Everything changed. There's going to be a false flag attack. There's going to be an attack on America. We have to fight for our freedom. They're going to make up some crap.
Don, do you have anything to say about that? Because, I mean, I know, and this Gerald Celente's history, right? What he was talking about at Afghanistan. And that's when everybody, what was it, 90%, I think, Gerald, were down for war for going in
88.
there? Something,
88.
yeah, something ridiculous.
88.
But we have a lot of pulling behind the curtain and seeing the Wizard of Oz. I think most people now are way more skeptical of the government today than they are back then. You're saying no.
No, they're skeptical, but it doesn't make a difference. It doesn't make a difference. The murderers are in charge. At this point, it doesn't make a difference. Again, it's a crime syndicate running the country.
So then, my next question is, if the crime syndicate is running loose, you guys have obviously made your opinions about Ukraine. What's going to happen in Israel? I mean, the Rafah border crossing during the Super Bowl. I say, you know, it's just it even startled me that they would get away with telling people to go to a certain area where they're safe, bombing that area, and then gloating about it after. Don,
you want to really get perspective. Back in February of 2011, on YouTube, pull Susan Rice's various comments at the Security Council meetings and the press, whatever they call it, outside the Security Council chambers, from February 26th and March 17th or 18th, I think, when the UN Security Council adopted resolutions 1970 and 1973 having to do with Libya. These were the 2 resolutions that were used by, even though you can't find it anywhere in the language of the two resolutions, except with the most expansive reading of the terms. The U.S. used these to begin a bombing campaign on March 20th of Libya that ran for 12 hours over every city in that country of, I think, 6 or 7 million people at the time. 12 hours a day until October 20th, in other words, 7 months later. This was over supposed civilian casualties of a government crackdown on protests that turned out to be fake, and whose numbers, when they were crying at the Security Council that this action had to be taken immediately, and everything in the world was recited in terms of this being, another Hitler, evil, etc., the numbers were in the hundreds that they were being accused of killing. This is over the course of a period from, I think, December until March or April of 2011, while the U.S. was actually exciting an uprising and an invasion in Benghazi by Al-Qaeda. That's what the response was by the state taking the U.S. at its word, and that warranted a 7-month bombing campaign that leveled the country.
Yeah.
As opposed to 30,000 people, including somewhere around 15,000 children that have been murdered since October 7th or 8th by Israel with our money that they just approved in the Senate as part of what you were discussing before, another 12 or 15 billion dollars of, because they ran out of bombs.
So all of us here at one point, I don't want to say we supported, but we were kind of like curious and excited to see RFK run for president. I'm baffled. I'm just mind blown by his decision to still stick by what's going on as far as his position on Israel. That, in other words, it's justified. I think that if RFK came out and said, listen, I think that Israel has a right to exist, but we need a ceasefire right now, he would have kept the majority of his supporters. I think he lost a lot of them that way. Gerald, we had Dennis Kucinich speak at the event when he was supporting the campaign, when he was his campaign manager. Is he dead in the water? I mean, I know regardless of what's going on, elections really don't change anything, but the movement he had seems to be dead in the water. Your thoughts on RFK and his position on Israel? Has it completely killed his candidacy? Yes or no?
Okay, you were one of the speakers at my Occupy Peace rally in May of last year. Ed Kucinich was one of the speakers, and Kucinich was his campaign manager. Kucinich ran for president. He was a congressman and mayor of Cleveland and a congressman, and he's no longer the campaign manager. I had donated the maximum amount of money to RFK Jr. Spoke with him on the telephone twice. And they invited me down to Philadelphia when he announced he was running as an independent candidate. I no longer support RFK Jr., and I got my money back because of his stance on Israel and the idiocy of what he says. And you don't have to hear that coming out of my mouth. You could hear it coming out of the mouth of Max Blumenthal, a Jewish guy, making fun of Kennedy, how stupid he is when he starts talking about Israel and the Palestinians. Oh, also Norman Finkelstein, another Jewish guy, ripping Kennedy apart. It's a freak show. I have nothing to do with him. He sounds ignorant and stupid when he talks about this. So I don't know where he's getting his dough from. But about Israel's right to exist, I believe it has absolutely zero right to exist, and the whole damn thing was made up. And this is your Trends Journal from 2006, Crusades 2000. Regardless of what England's reasons or intentions were, self-serving or otherwise, Crusades 2000 was set in motion by the 1917 Balfour Declaration that laid the foundation for Israel. This is the quote from the Balfour Declaration. His Majesty's government, His Majesty, right? His Majesty doesn't piss a shit. It says His Majesty. His Majesty's government views with favor the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people. Wait a minute. I got some bastard from England where the sun never sets on the British Empire that slaughters people all over the world, the king, saying that His Majesty's government views with favor in establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people. Who the hell are you to say that? But it gets better. And will use its best endeavors to facilitate the achievement of this objective. All right? Who the hell are you to do this?
Yeah.
And then the United Nations declared this land belongs to the Jewish people. The United Nothings. United bunch of clowns. Oh, once upon a time, there was a League of Nations that America didn't want to get into. Yeah, that became the United Nations. The United Nations that's doing zero about the slaughter. The United Nations, Don was talking about Obama, Susan Rice, Hillary Clinton, Samantha Power, Gaddafi has to go. That United Nations, that NATO destroyed the richest country in Africa, where the people had more rights, benefits, and a better life than many people in the world. Oh, that United Nations, we declare. Oh, and that arrogant little boy, the Prime Minister of Israel, Isaac Herzog. God gave us this land, which I would say to him, hey, screw you. I don't believe in your God. Could you handle that? Could you take that, man? Who the hell are you? Oh, and that little slime ball, as I said, Lindsay, do you come out of the closet yet, Graham? This is a religious war. Hey, I'm an American. What am I involved in this religious war for? Why are you stealing my money to give bombs to quote the chosen people to slaughter all these people? This is demonic in front of everybody's eyes. Oh, and by the way, on the back of all the U.S. currencies, in God we trust. Hey, Gatson, what God you talking about?
Don, we got just a couple more questions, but I want your thoughts on that there as well, because we went to New Hampshire together, right? When we asked RFK his stance on Israel-Palestine after the whole Rogers Waters debacle, and it seems like we opened up a can of, shitworms over there, because the next thing you know, Glenn Greenwald was going after him, Max Blumenthal was going after him, The Hill was everybody was going after him, right? For asking that question. So your thoughts on RFK, and then we'll move on to the last two questions and get you guys out of here.
Well, at first, my thoughts on what they call the State of Israel, that the legal entity or illegal entity, I guess, more accurate.
Yep.
Gerald just recited a good part of the history. Starting with Herzog, and
he left out the Rothschilds, though, right? The Rothschilds wanted a Jewish state too, as well.
Well, actually, the Balfour letter is, I believe, it's addressed to him, right? Yeah, to Lord Rothschild. Yeah,
Lord.
So you in essence have a European, a white settler state. Let's be clear about it. People toss this term around all over the place. Let's look at the most recent and most egregious example of it. This isn't the 17th or 18th or 16th century, or even the 19th century. This is the middle of the 20th century, the post-war period. A white settler state is dropped into Palestine. The enabling fiction divides the land between the people who own it and these new white settlers, who then, through just mere providence and the evilness of the people who live there, their unwillingness to accept such a, beneficent presence, end up losing almost all of the rest of it.
Yep.
And now what we're witnessing in the process, burning down villages, murdering the inhabitants, sort of like the U.S. did in Vietnam in the 60s and late 60s and early 70s. And finally, coming to the point where we are now, where they're doing the cleanup work. You have the what they call the Gaza Strip, which was the Palestinian coast, or part of the Palestinian coast. 2.5 million people stuck in barbed wire into this small space, bombed periodically since 2007, occupied from 1967 until 2006, and now being exterminated on television. Not a goddamn word out of most of the people in politics, other than how much more money can we send them? That is what Israel actually is. Bobby Kennedy's position on that is too close to the position of the people who are implementing this policy. He's a theoretician where Biden and Trump are practitioners in terms of the history of it. But the most remarkable thing to me is to hear him describe, on the one hand, the agency capture, talking about the CIA being an agency that has been captured and whose purpose is to generate wars that will in turn generate income streams from arms manufacturers, etc. That takes this critique across the government and doesn't see the horror of an actual televised genocide that has almost unanimous, practically speaking, has unanimous support across the government and its agencies, including the CIA, and the hand of one of the worst capturers of the government in Washington, that being the Israel lobby. Somehow, I don't understand how he reconciles these two things. And so I don't know what else to say about that.
Yeah. He's got to be compromised, right? I mean, he has to be compromised.
I don't know what it is.
I don't believe he believes the bullshit he spouts about Israel. He has to be compromised. I mean, look, where there's smoke, there's fire kind of situation. There is the Ghislaine Maxwell on that Epstein's plane. There's talk about his history and his addictions back in the days. He's got to be compromised.
To me, the germane thing to me is what people do and not what intent I can impute to them. Because honestly, if they kill me with the best of intentions, I'm still fucking dead. And so I'm still not having it. Whatever is going through his mind, or whoever's pulling his strings, or whatever it is that's going on there, this is not compatible with this. And this is unacceptable. Totally unacceptable. And it makes me question this. Because I couldn't hold those two positions in my head without, a psychotic break or something.
Gerald, I want to give you a chance. I want to piggyback around. And Jamie, if you can put up a banner for this one, because I want to make sure that we clip this part out and talk about this. Because, Don came on the door talking about Ukraine, and he talked about BlackRock and their interest in the Ukraine with grain and whatnot. And it got a lot of hits and a lot of views. Gerald Celente, right? Trendsetter, understands finance better than most. Putin talked about what we had referred to in the Truther community as the controlled demolition of the United States of America by the Americas, right? What is going on with the banking system right now? Can you give us a little insight to what's happening? I mean, is quantitative easing going to fix this situation now moving forward, or are we doomed?
The banking system is going to go bust. When they launched the COVID war back in 2020 on Chinese Lunar New Year, the year of the rat, and people started, you got to work at home, and people are working at home now. week after week, month after month, year after year, they're saying to themselves, I've been getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning, commuting an hour and a half. I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm not going to do it. And then the people that rented all the office space is saying, listen, I got 500 people here sitting in cubicles. I don't see them. Yes, stay home a couple of days a week. We had forecast an office building bust over 3 years ago. And that as a result of that office building bust, you're going to see the banks go bust because they're going to start defaulting on their loans. Totally ignored by the media. So this is the data. According to Castle Systems with a K, your office occupancy rate in the United States is 53%. Your office vacancy rate, meaning empty buildings, 20%.
And growing.
And growing. Now, look up the data. In Europe, there are more work-at-home people than anywhere else, even more than America. You saw what happened at Canary Wharf. HSBC walked out one after another. They're all leaving. Now, the loans that they have on office buildings, they're interest rate loans. And they're coming up due. About $1 trillion of them are due this year. They have to renegotiate their loans as interest rates have gone way up. Oh, you heard about Bancorp? Oh, no, it only was in the news about a day and a half. There's a site called Wall Street on Parade by Russ and Pam Martins. It's a great site. And they list how the value of stocks in the banking industry for small and medium-sized banks that hold most of these loans have gone down around over 50% from their highs. There's going to be a banking crisis, the likes of which we've never seen in the history of the world, part one or part two. And it's totally being ignored by the media. And when that happens, and by the way, one of my sayings is when all else fails, they take you to war. Again, let's go back to the Israel war. Netanyahu gets elected in December of 2020, not elected, but the prime minister, because of the votes, they brought him in December of 2022. You read your Trends Journal, week after week after week after week after week after week, they're slaughtering Palestinians in the West Bank. He tries to push through a Judicial Reform Act. There are 39 weeks of major protests in Israel.
Yeah.
And that's arrogant Isaac Herzog, the prime minister, called it a civil war. His language. But Hamas attacks on it October 17th, October 7th, it's all forgotten. Now going back to the crash coming. What followed the Great Depression? Oh, World War II. Go to History Today, type in on Google, Franklin Roosevelt seizes Japanese assets. Boop, 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 boop. Comes up, History Today, mainstream site. In July of 1941, remember the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor in December, Franklin Roosevelt seized all Japanese assets in America. How come? Why, those dirty Japs, they invaded French Indochina. French Indochina? What the hell are the French doing in Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos? Well, they're stealing their tin, their oil, rape, rob, pillage, you know. How dare those Japanese go in there? And then the Dutch and the English put sanctions on Japan, where they lost 3/4 of their export trade and 88% of their oil. Oh, they only import 100%. They lost 88%. Can't understand why they bombed Pearl Harbor. What followed the dot-com bust? The war on terror. We are going into an economic calamity. Oh, did you see the numbers that came out? Oh, consumer spending was down 0.8%. Oh, and they readjusted the numbers in December that said they were so high. it only went up 0.4%. And only 70% of America's GDP is by consumer spending, because slime boys like Bill Clinton with NAFTA and bringing China into the World Trade Organization lost all our manufacturing, only 11%. So now we're not buying stuff. The economy's going down. You have a banking crisis at hand. When all else fails, they take you to war.
Don, I'll let you just jump right in there.
There's nothing, I can't dispute any of that. It's exactly what's going on. Yeah, I remember watching the commercial loan performance numbers and the real estate market in Metro New York back in 2006, 2007. And in fact, we'd seen this rampant real estate market that grew, like the exurbia has been growing towards Kingston and beyond, even for most of the time that I was in the title insurance business in like 1972 on. And I remember seeing at the first quarter number. So I guess April of 2007, I'm looking at the first quarter numbers for 2007. And it was the first time that in the residential real estate market that I saw the inventory swell a little bit and the average or the mean or median, whatever sale price dropped ever so slightly in Orange County, which is kind of the periphery of the new suburban now. And thought, oh, shit, here we go. Because we had had a run up since the dot-com bubble burst and all that settled. And then while I was looking at that, I happened to see, because I looked at national stuff, but I didn't follow it. I was paying attention to the New York market, which is where I was operating. I saw that the name of the entity is that sort of is a reinsurer for all the commercial banks that loaned on malls, shopping malls. And there had been like after they had the big, construction frenzy in the late 60s and through the 70s, even into the early 80s, after it settled and they, did the final financing and, it was kind of, it's like sort of just a retail mode. All of a sudden the default rate shot way the fuck up. I think, again, this is the first quarter of 2007. And this was sort of a delayed reaction, really, to the beginning of people buying online, basically, that started almost 10 years earlier. Like, kind of after Windows 95 came out, people started having really good internet, a grasp of internet stuff. And a lot of stuff came to market then. And it became a competitor. And you started seeing major national retailers drop off. And then you started seeing some malls drop off, like the Dutchess County Mall, for example, which is at the intersection of the north, if the hell they call it, but Route 9 and Route 84, which is near the I-87 and I-84. This mall that had been one of the first ones open, it's still, even now, it's a ghost town. This started to happen as a national phenomenon, and that entire market collapsed like it was a controlled demolition. And for all I know, it was, because there was enough time for people to understand what was going on if they were actually following it. And from there, all right, so I'm working at this title company. And at the end of the year of 2008, we're talking, we always send out a newsletter to our clients, people in real estate, lawyers, brokers, bankers, etc. And the guy who owned the agency for 50 years had retired. And so his daughter owned the business, and I was working with her with friends since we were kids. Would you write this year? Okay. So I write a prediction basically saying, hold on to your hat. It's going to be a rough ride for 2008. And I detailed all these different things to show like where we were going. And they told me, you can't send that out, man. Our clients are going to have heart attacks and stuff. And I'm saying maybe they ought to go find a chair in a cardiac care unit and wait for this to happen because it's going to happen.
Yeah.
And as it turns out, we saw what happened in 2008. It does, I've been reading your stuff over the years, and you're right just about everything that you write about when you write about this stuff. And I see exactly what you're talking about. And it scares the hell out of me because obviously this is something that manifests. You had a global economy, arguably even in the 18th century, but in the 19th and early 20th century, you had kind of a global collapse in the late 20s, in 1929 or whatever, and a couple of dress rehearsals for that, I think. But the scale and the depth of penetration of this one that we're standing, I think we're in already, but we're standing at the precipice of, is going to be mind-boggling. And also the nature of everything, I think it's already changed, and it's just becoming manifest. People get sort of mystified by AI and, all these different technologies that are new, but these things have been, it doesn't matter whether they create some killer dog that runs amok and, eats everybody or whatever with AI. Rather, the operation of the global economy is pretty much in a position where it no longer requires us. And so the dynamics of what was bring another depression. That's how that operates. People that have the levers of power that can print money and make economic policy, raise or lower tariffs, raise or lower wages, and buy shit with federal money, whatever. They have a pretty good handle on how to make this Megillah work now. And I'll repeat this part. They're at the point, I think, where they don't need us.
No.
So we're before the problem of, oversupply and labor unrest and financial chaos in the economy or whatever could be solved with a war. So you could do like Keynesian stimulus by spending a shitload of money on weapons and blowing stuff up. So you had to build it again and whatever. That kind of had its own purpose. These things can now be focused for a purpose. Basically, we're going to redesign the world for ourselves, and you really don't have a vote. And I feel like we're as delusional as that might have sounded 10 years ago. I'm looking at this stuff now, trying to come up with another explanation, and I can't.
Somebody in the chat said, don't ever forget that Putin ended COVID, cured COVID, right? So a war brought us out of the whole scare. Last question. I got to get you guys out of here. You guys have been here for too long anyways. I do appreciate you guys coming here, but I did tell people we were going to talk about the border. And me and Don have been somewhat on the same page when it comes to the border a lot. I think it's a lot of us who've done work in Latin America, solidarity work, or I go and I observe the elections and whatnot. I always point to our occupation and our foreign policy as a driving force of why there's so much migration to the southern border. But I got to tell you, a lot of people have been hitting me up and they said there's something else to this right now, that it seems to be weaponized. And it seems like Naomi Wolf wrote a Substack. If you get a chance, I just started peeking at it. I got to dive more into it because she put a lot of receipts. There's a friend of mine who told me that in Italy, they did the same thing. And they're doing the same thing in Hawaii right now, where they allow all this crazy spending to go on. Where, in other words, to house a hotel victim in Hawaii, they get 3 times the rate. The same thing's happening in New York right now. We had Diane Sarah on the other day talk about what she experienced when she went to some parts of Manhattan and saw this. Is there something more? And I'll let you go first, Gerald. Is there something more to what's going on to the border today that's been weaponized and exploited by the ruling class than normal times in the past?
In tracking trends is an understanding of where we are, how we got here, and where we were going. John was talking about Libya. When Gaddafi was being thrown out. There's the video everybody could watch. He warned, if you get rid of me, you're going to have a crisis in Europe that you're not going to be able to handle. He was stopping people from going from Libya, and it was Libya like that far away from Spain, that far away from Sicily. Number two, the Libyan war, and then you have a financial crisis happening. One of our top trends for 2020 was New World Disorder. This is before we put this came out a couple of weeks before the COVID war. There were protests going on all over the world, in Algeria, in India, in South Africa, in Chile, in Bolivia, in Lebanon, all over. France, the Yellow Vests, people protesting against the lack of basic living standards, government corruption, crime, and violence. The escalation of immigration, and then, let's say I forgot about the Libyan war, then there's the Syrian war, brought to you by the Nobel Peace of Crap Prize winner, Barack Obama. Over 4 million Syrians left. And then the Afghan war, the Iraq war, people flooding out. Then the COVID war begins. You can't go out in the street anymore. Get back in your house. They stopped all of the protests, all of them. So this was going on before this, what's going on now. Now, again, speaking about the bigs taking over, they've taken over everything. They own everything. The people are nothing more. We, the people, are nothing more than plantation workers of Slavelandia. When we were young guys, there were grocery stores, hardware stores, stationery stores, drug stores. Now they're all chains. Every time I go into a Home Depot, I only go there to get, I don't go in the other places. I got to get, stuff I need. My heart breaks when I see the people working there. They have no future. Now let's go to these other countries. Now there's another thing going on. Out of Germany, they just passed a law to let more migrants come in. You know why? They're saying they need more labor. Let's go back again. When we were young guys, I remember my parents talking about their cousin Constantino they couldn't get him in from Italy because restrictions were so high. And then the Vietnam War began. And I'm Vietnam War age, I'm 77 years old. I'm prime draft me. They're drafting everybody. They needed more cheap labor. They changed the immigration laws under, what's his name? Johnson.
LBJ.
Yeah, LB Jerkoff.
LBJ.
This is my book, Trends 2000, 1996. The internet revolution's beginning. They needed cheap labor. They brought in the H-1B visas to get more cheap labor. And now they still need more cheap labor. So I think part of this is also the cheap labor thing. They're saying they want cheap labor. And that's what they're doing it for as well. And again, to put it in a broader perspective, if you can't stop people coming over the border, you're going to tell me you're going to win a war against Russia, against China? Are you kidding me? You couldn't be Vietnam or Iraq or Afghanistan. You can't close down the borders. And by the way, the Occupy Peace movement that I moved over a decade ago, that I started, that you spoke at, Craig, was one of the foundations of it is to close almost 1,000 bases overseas and bring home the troops to secure the homeland.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's the way I see it.
Yeah.
Don?
Yeah. That's pretty much how I see it. You have well, look at Africa with Gaddafi, for example. They took Gaddafi out and they destroyed Libya because Gaddafi was the great leader, etc. That was his title. But Gaddafi wasn't Libya. Libya was Libya. Libya was. I sat in on a session in the Great Hall of the People in Tripoli. I never saw anything like it. It's sort of like like what a town hall in New England tries to be. So, because just I want to say that because people have the idea that he was a dictator and that it was a police state of some kind or whatever. If only it was a police state. We every day we try to cross this highway to go from one hotel to another, and there were no police anywhere. When they destroyed Libya, what they did immediately thereafter was install the U.S. Military Africa Command, AFRICOM. If you look at africom.mil website, that was operating from Stuttgart, Germany at the beginning of 2011, after it was founded by George Bush on his way out in September, I think, of 2008. There was one tiny military base, I think in Djibouti, if I remember. Otherwise, no one in Africa would or could allow the U.S. to put a military base there. Any government that did that would have been anywhere in the country, no matter what other contradictions there are. Anywhere else on the continent, that government would have been overthrown immediately. After they destroyed Libya, and after they tore the president of Cote d'Ivoire out at gunpoint, the French troops did, and reimposed French colonial control of that country. Suddenly, by the end of 2011, AFRICOM was in command control of the militaries of 35 African countries.
Oh.
This is what the son of an African, America's first black president, registered trademark, did for Africa. He brought the U.S. military there as an occupation force. So these things are very closely related. And now they're talking about, you've had already for a few years, a pathway to citizenship here is to serve in the U.S. military. And then if you bring people, by the way, into the United States, more workers, when you have a situation when there's, one person for, two people for every job, basically, and now you bring in another person, so now there's 3 people for other job. It doesn't even matter if they were low-paid workers where they came from or not. Wages go down. The more workers you have chasing fewer jobs, the lower wages go. That's how it works. It's just a market like anything else. And they're doing this intentionally.
And on the wage thing, by the way, that little lowlife piece of crap, the Fed head, Jerome Powell, who said that inflation was temporary and transitory, he was blaming higher wages on and on again for inflation. Total BS.
Gentlemen, I kept you long enough. Thank you so much for coming on. Don Debar, Gerald Celente, my 2 favorite paisans. I'll catch up with you guys soon when I get out to New York. I love you both. Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys. Take care, Gerald. Be well.
Nice to meet you, man. Thank you.
Thanks.
Fun times today.
Bye, guys.